Deep inside one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth, where predators rule through teeth, claws, and instinct, there exists a tribe that was never meant to survive, yet somehow did, not because of strength, weapons, or advanced technology, but because of an intelligence so refined that it quietly outplayed every natural killer around it. What makes this tribe terrifying to predators is not what they attack with, but what they understand about fear, behavior, and perception. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because the truth you're about to hear is rarely told, and once you truly understand it, the jungle will never feel the same again. The tribe lived in a region where apex predators dominated every imaginable food chain, from leopards stalking silently through dense foliage, to venomous snakes hidden beneath leaves, massive constrictors coiled in shadows, crocodiles waiting motionless beneath still water, and insects whose single bite could end a human life in hours. Yet generation after generation, this tribe did not merely survive within this environment, it flourished. And what baffled early researchers was that they did so without walls, without metal weapons, and without permanent settlements, because their greatest defense was not physical at all, but psychological, built from a deep understanding of predator behavior that modern science would only begin to recognize centuries later. The tribe understood that predators do not attack randomly, but operate on patterns of energy efficiency, fear assessment, and environmental signals, and instead of confronting these creatures directly, they reshaped the jungle's perception of them, turning themselves into something predators instinctively avoided by using sound patterns, movement rhythms, scent manipulation, and environmental misdirection that made hunting them feel costly, unpredictable, and unnatural. In nature, predators avoid risk more than they seek reward, and this tribe mastered that rule better than any animal, never walking in straight lines, never following predictable paths, never sleeping in the same location twice in succession, and never allowing their presence to become familiar, because familiarity in the jungle invites attack, while uncertainty creates hesitation, and hesitation alone is often enough to survive. They understood that predators rely heavily on visual confirmation before striking, so they broke their outlines, smeared natural substances that disrupted scent trails, and timed their movements to moments when predators were least alert, such as after feeding cycles or during subtle temperature shifts. Sound to them was a language of survival, which is why they never spoke loudly, never shouted, and never laughed openly, instead communicating through subtle clicks, controlled breath patterns, and hand signals that blended seamlessly into the ambient noise of insects and wind, making their presence indistinguishable from the forest itself and causing predators to misclassify them not as prey, but as background. Perhaps the most unsettling tactic was psychological conditioning, as the tribe deliberately allowed predators to witness failed hunts near them, slowly associating human silhouettes with wasted energy, confusion, and discomfort, until approaching these humans felt pointless and exhausting. This knowledge was passed down orally, not as myths or legends, but as practical survival instructions taught to children before they could even hunt, because in this tribe, understanding came before strength, and awareness always came before aggression. When outsiders eventually encountered them, they were shocked not by what they saw, but by what they didn't see. No scars, no defensive fortifications, no signs of constant battle, only calm faces, controlled movements, and a quiet confidence that suggested danger simply did not exist, even though it did, having been neutralized long before it could arrive. The tribe understood something modern society often forgets, that dominance in nature is not about force, but about being unreadable. And while predators are masters at detecting weakness, this tribe offered none, having learned to control fear responses so completely that they never ran unless absolutely necessary and never froze in panic, knowing that sudden emotional spikes trigger predator instincts. Instead, they moved with deliberate calm, training their nervous systems to remain steady even when death was nearby, which made them unnatural in the eyes of animals, because fear has a smell, a sound, and a posture. And when predators couldn't detect it, they couldn't commit to the kill. Over generations, this behavioral mastery turned the tribe into a paradox of the jungle, physically vulnerable yet functionally untouchable. And what made them even more formidable was their refusal to dominate the environment, as they never overhunted, never depleted food sources, and never disrupted ecological balance, ensuring predators never associated scarcity with human presence, because hunger creates aggression, while abundance maintains neutrality. This balance meant predators had no incentive to eliminate them, as the tribe threatened no territory, no resources, and no hierarchy. And when rare attacks did occur, they were studied, remembered, and adapted against rather than emotionally reacted to, treating failure as information instead of trauma, and refining their methods continuously. Over time, the jungle itself seemed to accommodate them, as if recognizing them not as intruders but as a stable variable within its system, which is what made authorities uneasy when reports finally reached the outside world, because the tribe did not survive by dominating predators but by understanding them deeply enough to never be worth the effort. This raises a disturbing question. If humans once mastered survival through intelligence alone, without weapons or walls, what have we forgotten? And more importantly, what have predators learned about us since then? Because while this tribe remained unreadable, modern humans became loud, predictable, and emotionally reactive, traits the jungle never forgives. As explorers began mapping the region, they noticed something unsettling, that predator populations near tribal territories were not reduced and not aggressive, but cautious, alert, and almost respectful, as if recognizing an intelligence equal to their own, leading researchers to a chilling conclusion that the most successful survival strategy in history was not the evolution of the body, but the evolution of perception. The jungle rewarded those who learned to listen rather than conquer, and this tribe became living proof that intelligence, when applied silently and consistently, can neutralize even the most efficient killers nature has ever produced. But this story does not end here, because the methods that kept this tribe alive were not accidental. And once we uncover how they trained their minds from childhood and encoded survival into daily rituals, the truth becomes even more unsettling, as the jungle never spared them but tested them constantly, and they passed every test not by fighting back, but by thinking ahead. In the next part, we'll uncover how this tribe taught children to outthink predators before they could even speak, and why their knowledge was considered too dangerous to spread beyond the jungle. What truly separated this tribe from every other human group that had ever entered the jungle was not just what they avoided doing, but what they deliberately trained themselves to become. Because from early childhood, survival was not taught as a reaction to danger, but as a mindset built long before danger ever appeared, where children were raised not with stories of monsters and fear, but with lessons about patterns, patience, and restraint, learning to sit silently for hours observing insects, birds, and animals without interference, because the first rule they were taught was that nothing in the jungle moves without a reason, and if you can understand the reason, you can predict the movement. From a very young age, children were trained to control their breathing, their posture, and even their blinking, learning how small movements ripple through the environment and alert unseen eyes. And instead of teaching them to fight predators, elders taught them how predators think, how hunger alters decision-making, how fear sharpens focus, and how uncertainty disrupts instinct. So by the time a child could speak fluently, they already understood that survival was not about bravery, but about never becoming the easiest option. Daily rituals reinforced this philosophy, as mornings began not with activity, but with stillness, allowing the jungle to settle before movement began, and nights ended without fires unless absolutely necessary, because light announces intention, and intention invites attention. And even when fire was used, it was controlled, masked, and positioned to confuse rather than comfort. Over generations, this mental discipline created humans who did not behave like prey, but also did not behave like competitors, placing them in a strange psychological space that predators could not easily categorize. And in nature, what cannot be categorized is often avoided. The tribe also understood something deeply unsettling, that predators remember, and so every interaction mattered, which is why elders carefully selected moments when predators would see them, ensuring those encounters were confusing, uneventful, and unrewarding, slowly training animals to associate human presence with wasted time rather than opportunity. Even injuries were treated differently, as wounded members were never allowed to show weakness publicly, not out of shame, but because vulnerability broadcasts signals predators can detect from astonishing distances. And so pain was managed quietly, movement was adjusted subtly, and the group adapted collectively to protect the injured without drawing attention.
Outsiders who later studied the tribe noticed that even their emotional expressions were controlled, as there were no sudden outbursts of joy, anger, or grief in open spaces, because emotional intensity alters posture, breathing, and muscle tension in ways animals instinctively recognize, and instead emotions were processed privately, contained, and released in safe, enclosed environments, further reducing the tribe's visibility in the psychological landscape of the jungle. As time passed, the tribe's relationship with predators evolved into something resembling mutual awareness rather than conflict, where animals adjusted routes to avoid human paths, and humans adjusted movement to avoid interrupting hunting zones, creating an invisible agreement that neither side ever formalized, yet both appeared to respect. This balance, however, was fragile, and the tribe knew it, which is why knowledge was guarded carefully, shared only through direct experience rather than explanation, because understanding without discipline could be fatal, and this was the reason elders resisted outside contact so fiercely, fearing not invasion, but imitation without comprehension. When modern explorers finally attempted prolonged observation, they unknowingly disrupted this equilibrium, bringing unfamiliar scents, sounds, and behaviors that predators could not interpret, and for the first time in generations, the jungle reacted aggressively, not toward the tribe, but toward the outsiders themselves, reinforcing a terrifying realization that the tribe was not protected by the jungle, but synchronized with it. Authorities later debated whether this knowledge should be documented, taught, or suppressed, because the implications extended far beyond survival, suggesting that human dominance had once been rooted not in control, but in restraint, not in expansion, but in alignment, and that modern humanity had traded perception for convenience, subtlety for speed, and awareness for noise. The most chilling discovery came when researchers compared historical accounts from different regions and eras, realizing that similar tribes with similar methods had existed before, only to disappear once contact with modern society disrupted their behavioral balance, not because they were killed by predators, but because they forgot how to be unreadable. And so the story of this tribe does not end with conquest, extinction, or tragedy, but with a quiet warning encoded into their continued existence, that survival is not about being the strongest species, but about being the least disruptive one, and that intelligence, when stripped of ego, can coexist with even the most efficient killers on Earth. In the end, the tribe did not outsmart predators by defeating them, but by never giving them a reason to try. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is that the jungle never stopped being dangerous. Humans simply stopped listening, forgot how to move without announcing themselves, forgot how to exist without demanding attention. And as long as modern humanity continues to believe that dominance equals safety, the jungle will remain a place of fear, while this silent tribe remains proof that the greatest survival strategy was never hidden in weapons or technology, but in perception so refined that danger passes by without noticing you were ever there.